So friends, now today we will discuss about the features of the cerebrum, external features of the cerebrum. So now, starting with the cerebral hemispheres, we have two cerebral hemispheres which we can see. The two cerebral hemispheres are connected with each other by way of the corpus callosum. So the two cerebral hemispheres are connected with each other by a band of corpus callosum, which you can see here. So the corpus callosum is a commissural fibers connecting two cerebral hemispheres. Throughout on the whole of the surface of the cerebral hemisphere, we see the depressions. They are known as the sulci, and elevations between the depression is known as the gyri. So this is the sulcus, this is the gyrus. Everywhere throughout on the cerebrum, we see such sulci and gyri. Now we are discussing each hemisphere has three borders and three surfaces. This surface is known as the superomedial surface. This superomedial borders. This one is known as inferolateral border. This one is known as inferomedial border. Between them we have different surfaces. Here between superomedial and the superomedial and inferolateral border we have the superolateral surface. So this whole surface is known as superolateral surface. Between the superomedial border and the inferomedial border we have the medial surface. So this whole surface is known as medial surface. We see upside down, we see between inferolateral and inferomedial, this is the inferior surface. This whole is inferior surface of the cerebrum. Describing the superolateral surface. Superolateral surface here is divided into the lobes by demarcating sulci. Here we see the most important sulcus, it is known as central sulcus, extending from the superomedial border, going obliquely downwards and reach near up to the lateral sulcus but does not meet with it. It ends short of it. So that's a central sulcus. In front of the central sulcus, whatever part of cerebrum we see here is a frontal lobe. Behind the central sulcus, whatever part we see here is the parietal lobe. Then here we see the another important sulcus which is important for marking the lobes is the lateral sulcus. This is the part of the lateral sulcus which is known as stem. Stem of the lateral sulcus which divides into the three rami, the anterior one, the ascending ramus, and the longest, the posterior ramus of the lateral sulcus. Below the posterior ramus of the lateral sulcus, we have this, the temporal lobe. The third important sulcus which is important for marking the lobe here is the parieto-occipital sulcus which is prominently seen on medial surface. So this is a parieto-occipital sulcus which along with the calcarine sulcus forms a Y-shaped formation on medial surface. This parietal sulcus extending on the superolateral surface is taken as one point for marking an imaginary line. Another mark is on the inferolateral border. The highest point of it is known as preoccipital notch. So between parieto-occipital sulcus and the preoccipital notch we join an imaginary line. Behind this imaginary line, whatever lobe is there is known as occipital lobe. So that's how ultimately on the superolateral surface three lobes are marked: the frontal lobe, the parietal lobe, the temporal lobe, and the occipital lobe. Now describing important sulci, gyri and areas in each lobe, we come to the frontal lobe. Frontal lobe is in front of the central sulcus. In front of central sulcus we have a gyrus known as precentral gyrus. This gyrus is between frontal central sulcus and the precentral sulcus. Precentral sulcus is in front of the precentral gyrus. This particular precentral gyrus is the motor area of cerebrum. In front of the precentral sulcus we have two oblique sulci. They are known as superior frontal sulcus and inferior frontal sulcus. This divides the lobe into three gyri: superior frontal gyrus, middle frontal gyrus, and inferior frontal gyrus. Important area in the superior frontal gyrus here in front of the precentral sulcus is known as the premotor area, which is concerned with the planning of the movement, while motor area is concerned with the execution of the movement. In the lower part here, that is the inferior frontal gyrus, we have a triangular area between anterior and ascending rami of the lateral sulcus. This area is known as pars triangularis, which contains Broca's motor area of speech, which is concerned with the motor speech of the person. This is what is important areas here in the frontal lobe. Rest of the frontal lobe is known as the prefrontal cortex. It is known as silent area of brain because earlier it was believed that it is silent and not functional. But now it is known that it's a part of the limbic system and concerned with the personality, social and emotional behavior and the abstract thinking. So this is what is all about the frontal lobe. Coming to the parietal lobe here, behind the central sulcus we have a post-central gyrus, which is a primary sensory area. Behind the primary sensory area here we have the post-central sulcus. So this is a post-central gyrus with the primary sensory area. This is the post-central sulcus. Behind the post-central sulcus in the upper part we have the intraparietal, superior parietal lobule above the intraparietal sulcus. So this one is superior parietal lobule, which contains the secondary sensory area, which keeps a memory of sensations received from the primary area. Here in the lower part of the parietal lobe, at the terminal end of the lateral sulcus, we have Wernicke's sensory area of speech, which is responsible for sensory speech, that is identification of the words in the text and the sound which is listened by a person. So this is the identification of the textual material and the words in the sound. So there is a sensory speech. So this is what is about the parietal lobe and its important areas and the sulci gyri. Coming to the temporal lobe, we have the two sulci, which is superior and inferior. Temporal sulci, which divides the lobe into superior, middle and inferior temporal gyri. In this superior temporal gyrus, near the central sulcus where it ends, we have an auditory area, and around it is the auditory association area. Auditory area is concerned with the hearing, while auditory association area is concerned with the memory of the sound heard by a person. So this completes our temporal lobe. Coming to the occipital lobe here, most of the important area is on the medial surface, above and below the calcarine sulcus. Above and below the calcarine sulcus, we have a visual area concerned with the vision. Still outer to it, we have visual association area concerned with the memory of earlier images seen by the person. So this is what is the occipital lobe and important sulci here and the important areas. So this completes our superior surface with important sulci, gyri and the areas. Coming to the medial surface, which we see the most important part is corpus callosum. It's a fiber system of the cerebrum. Here you find the rostrum, which is going downwards and backwards and tapering part. Anterior band, which is known as genu. The largest part between genu and rostrum is known as the body. Here the terminal dilated part or the widest part of the corpus callosum is known as splenium. So these are the four parts of the corpus callosum known as rostrum, genu, body and the splenium. Above the corpus callosum we see the sulcus known as the callosal sulcus, named on the callosum, corpus callosum, callosal sulcus. Above the callosum we have a gyrus, which is known as cingulate gyrus. It's a part of limbic system. Above this gyrus, this is a cingulate gyrus. Above the cingulate gyrus, a large sulcus which you see is known as cingulate sulcus. So this is a cingulate sulcus, this is cingulate gyrus, this is a callosal sulcus, this is a corpus callosum. Here we have already seen the parieto-occipital and the calcarine sulcus, which is important. Between the parietal occipital sulcus and calcarine sulcus, the part is known as cuneus. In front of the cuneus, this part is known as precuneus. So these are the parts which are seen on the medial surface. Rest of this part is diencephalon, which we'll discuss later on with the diencephalon. Coming to the inferior surface divided into two parts, a smaller part anterior and larger part posterior. Anterior part is known as orbital part and posterior large part is known as tentorial part. In the orbital part, you find orbital sulci and gyri forms H shape, while here in the medial part you find a linear sulcus known as olfactory sulcus, where you find olfactory tract. Medial to the olfactory tract you find a gyrus known as gyrus rectus. So this is what is all about the orbital part. In the tentorial part, usually you find from medial to lateral the parts. The medial most here is known as uncus and it's a part of hippocampus. Lateral to it you find here the parahippocampal gyrus, and still lateral you find the occipitotemporal gyri, which ultimately merge with the occipital and the temporal lobe both. So functionally these particular hippocampal and parahippocampal parts are significant because they are part of the limbic system and concerned with the recent and the past memory of the person. So this is what is all about the tentorial part, which is related to tentorium cerebelli. Orbital part is related to orbit, and tentorial part is related to tentorium cerebelli. So this is what about the different parts. Coming to the three different poles of the cerebrum, here the antemost pole is known as the frontal pole, the posteriormost pole is known as occipital pole, and the anteriormost part of the temporal lobe is known as temporal pole. This completes our three borders, three surfaces, and three poles of the cerebrum with important sulci, gyra, and areas of the brain.
Finish.